Greetings, weary time traveler. Tonight, you won't be playing the romanticized cowboy or gunslinger from those cheap novels and liquor advertisements. No, your cast is something far more expendable. A Chinese railroad worker in the Wild West, imported by the thousands, worked until your bones splinter like dry timber, then discarded the instant you become less useful than a pack mule. You'll swing picks until your palms bleed, haul stones that break weaker men's spines, dig graves that might one day hold your own remains. Yet none of this will ever belong to you. Not the tracks, not the land, not even your own damned name. Before the mountain frost turns your toes black and dynamite powder fills your lungs with permanent grit, do me one small favor. Tell me where you're listening from and what hour your clock shows. I live for these global connections in the dark. If you'd like early access to more of these suffocating walks through history's forgotten corners, ad-free episodes, or simply wish to support this journey, the Patreon link awaits in the description. But for now, settle in, find your least uncomfortable position. Let's begin properly. You don't arrive carrying luggage or expecting welcomes. You arrive branded with a number, one among countless faceless bodies pressed flesh to flesh in the rancid belly of a ship that reeks of rotting cabbage, human waste, and broken promises. The voyage from Guangdong carries no romance, just endless, freezing, deafening misery. A floating coffin stacked with the hopeful, the desperate, and the deliberately deceived. The exact day of departure has blurred in your memory. Time lost meaning somewhere between the first bowl of maggot-ridden rice and watching a stranger beside you stop breathing while others stepped over his corpse. When California's coastline finally drags itself into view, you're too exhausted for gratitude. Your legs tremble when forced upright. Your skin peels in salty sheets. Your name still belongs to you, but not for much longer. San Francisco's docks assault your senses with chaos. English curses, Cantonese shouts, the agonized creak of wagons hauling human cargo like livestock. The stench here somehow surpasses the ships. Dead fish, animal dung, wood smoke, sour sweat, and that unmistakable reek of people surviving without welcome. Squinting through the fog, you search for something human, something kind. Instead, a carrot-haired boy points and laughs words you don't understand, but whose meaning needs no translation. The immigration agent doesn't ask your name, just prods you forward with a stick like herding cattle. Your papers get inspected by a man examining you the way one might assess a crate of suspect fruit. When you attempt a question in your dialect, he shouts over you, demanding the next in line. Chinatown offers no homecoming, just a maze of crumbling shanties and nailed-shut windows where laundry hangs like surrender flags. You cram with 20 others into an 8-man room where the walls sweat at night and rats gnaw through your bedding. Still, there's relief in hearing your language again. Not just words, but the rhythms of jokes that almost make you smile before you remember smiling draws attention. This isn't your destination. Within days, you're loaded onto eastbound wagons headed toward the freezing mountains. No one tells you where you're going. The foreman, a leather-faced white man with a broomstick mustache, barks orders swallowed by wagon groans. You comprehend only the universal language of hurry up, shut up, sit still. The men pass a dented rice wine bottle, speculating about their fate. Nevada? Utah? Maybe just digging their own mass grave? Nobody knows. But the pay's supposedly better than sweatshops or starvation back home. That's the arithmetic that passes for hope now. The landscape transforms from green hills to jagged ridges, passing through towns where locals stare at your wagon like it carries plague. A boy throws a rock that bruises your thigh. A woman spits as you pass. Signs everywhere proclaim, "No China allowed," and "White labor only." Someone translates. You don't laugh. The absurdity cuts deeper than humor, being so desperately needed, yet so profoundly unwanted. At the work camp, you're unloaded like sacks of grain. The foreman butchers names during roll call, not waiting for corrections. When one man insists on his real name, he's backhanded until his lip splits. "You're Charlie now," the foreman declares. You become John or Chin or whatever slur fits their tongues. You practice responding because survival here means answering to anything. Then comes the real work. Boots on sharp gravel, hauling sacks of pitiful supplies. A pick, shovel, threadbare blanket, dented bowl. The trail to the worksite climbs mercilessly. Your breath shortens, your shoulders scream. The camp appears suddenly, a clearing of lopsided tents beside a leaf-choked river that smells of mule piss. You're assigned to a 6-man tent already holding 8 bodies. The straw pile in the corner is your bed. Everything reeks of blood and mildew. Welcome home. Later, a Western-dressed translator with fading Cantonese explains the rules through clenched teeth. Dawn to dark work. Self-provided meals. Boil all water. Return tools intact. No compensation for injuries. No complaints tolerated. $30 monthly pay before deductions. Don't argue. Don't fight. Don't escape. Everyone nods. Wilderness kills faster than any company punishment. That first night, you clutch your meager belongings, one spare shirt, a comb, a single coin sewn into the hem, while someone snores and another weeps silently. The cold seeps through the tent floor. Your shoulders throb. Somewhere beyond the howling wind, a train whistle sounds. Not one you'll ride, but one you'll die building. The first casualty is your voice. Not literally. Your throat still functions, but language becomes useless here. English might as well be birdsong to your ears, and no one cares to translate. Orders come as fragmented shouts, half-words drowned in spit and impatience. Hesitation earns backhands or boot toes. You learn through humiliating trial. A grunt plus finger jab means lift this. A sharp whistle with arm point means go there. Urgent yelling means you're already failing. Mistakes teach painful lessons, not just to your body, though it collects bruises like a ledger, but to your dignity. The shame of incomprehension settles behind your ribs like a lodged bone. You mimic others' movements, guessing at patterns, sometimes right, often wrong. No one slows to explain. Here, there are no translations, only consequences. In camp, dialects blend into a makeshift pigeon of nods, gestures, and half-words. A raised eyebrow asks, "Is this yours?" A scoff and turned shoulder says, "Not anymore." Communication becomes shrugs, silences, eye movements that scream what mouths dare not. Posted signs might as well be hieroglyphics. One with a skull nearly gets a man killed when he touches the marked barrel and burns his hand to the bone. The irony stings. They warn of danger using words you can't read, then blame you for the accidents. After one explosion injury, a supervisor lectures about safety for 30 untranslated minutes. It might as well be static. Even attempted help becomes theater. A foreman once crouched beside you, speaking slowly like training a dog, gesturing wildly about carrying rocks. You nod not from understanding, but to end the pantomime. You carry the rock anyway. It's the only safe choice. Gradually, you fear your own voice, not just its words, but what reactions they might provoke. One young hothead mutters something after being shoved. Not loud, not threatening, just angry Cantonese the foreman couldn't possibly understand. The tone alone was enough. Next day, that man gets dynamite duty. The day after, they bury what's left under a cairn. You stack the stones without asking why. You already know. Names fare no better than speech. Yours gets butchered into syllables never meant to be split. Ching, chin, John, whatever sticks least. You stop correcting. The syllables dry in your mouth like old tea leaves. White workers mock your accent, pull their eyes slantwise, bow exaggeratedly. Their laughter needs no translation. You learn not to meet their eyes. They don't want conversation, just targets. Among your own, words become sparse. Speech feels dangerous, heavy with sharp edges. You've seen men cut themselves open on wrong phrases. The translator offers instructions, never kindness, resenting questions like personal insults. Brief moments of humanity feel fragile. Extra rice from a cook, a white worker pointing helpfully at gravel piles. But these flicker out like match flames. Your body becomes your primary language. Efficient movements, careful gestures, the silent pantomime of survival. A raised eyebrow poses questions. A wrist flick ends arguments. You become fluent in reading air. Who's angry? Who's exhausted? Whose moments from violence? It's not skill, it's necessity. Eventually, you stop speaking altogether. Not in protest, but exhaustion. Nodding is safer than explaining. At night, you sometimes speak in dreams, your mother's name, childhood jokes surfacing like drowned things. But even these fade, replaced by boot crunches, tool clangs, and barked orders that no longer need translation. When addressed, you respond. When not, you vanish. Speech risks, silence shields. And with that shield raised, your march toward another worksite, another stretch of wilderness needing breaking, another chorus of voices that will never understand you. The wind howls across the plains, carrying words you'll never speak again. Privacy becomes as mythical as dignity in this place. There's nowhere to wash without 20 pairs of eyes tracking your ribs poking through skin, nowhere to change clothes without exposing scars that tell your story better than words ever could. Men piss against the same trees where they hang their threadbare laundry. Someone dug a latrine trench behind the cook tent, but no amount of lime can mask the stench of collective despair. Mornings begin with the reek of mildew and unwashed bodies. Nights end with the symphony of snores, mutters, scratches, and that godforsaken coughing. Always the coughing, bouncing from one man's lungs to another's like some cruel game of consumption tag. You learn to breathe shallowly, though it makes no difference. This is a world without women. Not in the tents, not in the cookhouse, not even at the forest's edge where you sometimes imagine seeing civilization's ghost. What remains is a brittle masculinity forged between men too exhausted for pretense and too broken for pride. Conversations happen in grunts. Greetings become nods. You sit shoulder to shoulder, yet feel oceans apart. Some men have wives back in China. You see them tracing characters on folded letters with calloused fingers. Most don't speak of home. A few keep paper charms tucked in their bedding. Inked names of loved ones pressed flat like pressed flowers, serving as both memorial and shield. You suspect these talismans work harder than any of you. Dryness is a luxury your boots haven't known in weeks. They stay perpetually damp, the leather cracking like parched earth even as moisture seeps up from the ground. Your shirt never loses its clammy chill. Tent canvas collects condensation that drips with metronomic cruelty onto your face at night. You've stopped brushing mold from your collar. What's the point when it returns like a debt collector? The cook tent forms the camp's rancid heart, the only place with consistent heat if you don't mind sharing space with smoke and shouted obscenities. Each ethnic group cooks its own miserable meals. Your diet consists of rice boiled gray, fish so dried it could pass for bark, and the occasional vegetable if someone bartered successfully with a traveling peddler. Rice arrives in burlap sacks, hard little pebbles that take forever to soften. Firewood is perpetually scarce, turning water boiling into an exercise in frustration. Men elbow for stove space, eyeball each other's portions with the wary tension of prisoners expecting betrayal. No one starves exactly, but no one knows fullness either. Hunger becomes a constant companion. You stop noticing it until it's gone, which only happens when fever kills your appetite. Cleanliness is theoretical. The washing barrel turns to mud soup after 10 men dip their hands. You scrub your face with a rag and pretend it helps. Lice are a daily ritual, picked from seams and crushed between yellowed nails. You joke darkly that at least the lice stick with you, unlike your name or dignity. Winter's cold isn't just weather. It's a living thing that slithers into your bedding and coils around your spine. You wake with fingers curled like talons, jaw aching from unconscious clenching. When wind finds gaps in the tent, it cuts through like a blade. You've seen frost form on the inside canvas, delicate white veins spreading like some parasitic plant taking root in your lungs. Huddling for warmth isn't intimacy, it's thermodynamics. No one objects when bodies press closer in the night. Warmth is the last currency anyone can afford to share. The tents never stop moving. Every gust makes the canvas snap like a whip. You sleep lightly, if at all, attuned to every footstep crunching outside. Maybe it's the foreman coming to drag someone to early labor. Maybe it's a fight. Maybe another quiet death. The line between rest and vigilance dissolves. You wake often with your heart pounding, unsure what startled you. Occasionally, men vanish without explanation. One day they're coughing beside you. The next their bedding lies empty. No reassignments, no goodbyes, just absence as its own language. A missing man isn't a story here, it's a warning. Fires are rare luxuries. When one does crackle to life, men gather like moths, staring into flames as if they hold memories of warmth. No one speaks much around fires. Someone might hum half a lullaby before trailing off. You know better than to ask for the rest. Nothing here lasts long enough for second verses. There's nowhere to go when work ends. The forest would freeze you solid by midnight. The nearest town might as well be the moon for all the welcome you'd find. Some men talk about saving up to leave, but you've seen how quickly dreams wither in this air. The coughing worsens. One man wraps his face in cloth, but the sound just migrates to other tents. It becomes part of the landscape now, like wind or gravel crunching underfoot. You measure nights by how many men wake themselves coughing. You count fewer jokes, fewer songs, fewer footsteps at dawn. Hope becomes superstition. Rain turns camp into a swamp. Tents leak. Fires refuse to light. Clothes take days to dry, and when they do, they smell like sour milk. You walk carefully, but still fall. Everyone falls. No hands reach to help. Assisting someone here just means joining them in the mud. You stop expecting comfort. Sleep becomes something stolen, not given. A fragile rebellion against the inevitable return of pickaxes and shouted orders. When you do sleep, it's shallow, haunted by the same sounds that fill your days. Boots on dirt, coughing in the dark, the shuffle of men too tired to move but too afraid to stay still. Days don't really begin, they just resume. You wake, or more accurately, stop pretending to sleep, to the same relentless rhythm. Your damp boots wait like torturers' tools. Your breath fogs in the tense stale air. You shoulder tools without ceremony because ceremony is for people who expect better. The work site is a wound carved into the mountainside, jagged, unstable, bleeding loose rock. You're not laying track yet. First you must prepare the earth to receive it, which means blasting, hacking, and moving stone with nothing but muscle and suffering. There are no machines here. Steam engines are valuable, require maintenance, can't be replaced as easily as you. Mules at least get rest when exhausted. You don't. The tools are as broken as the men using them. Splintered shovel handles, wobbly pickaxe heads, wheelbarrows that groan under weights that would buckle smaller men. Gloves are rumors. Your palms blister, then callous, then split open again. By mid-morning your shoulders burn. By noon they go numb, which almost feels like relief until the pain returns deeper, angrier, like it resents being ignored. You swing your pick in rhythm, each strike sending jolts up your arms that the mountain barely notices. The foreman paces behind the line, barking orders that sometimes land on you, sometimes on no one in particular. When someone moves too slowly, he yells. When someone moves too quickly and drops something, he yells louder. His voice cuts through the clang of metal, not sharp, but serrated, designed to irritate rather than inspire. You learn to time movements to his presence. Work steadily but not noticeably. Look busy but not ambitious. Avoid eye contact always. Lunch isn't a meal but a pause, huddled in a rare patch of shade with other Chinese laborers, shielding rice from wind, while white workers up the slope eat stew with actual meat. One laughs while pointing at your group. You don't look up, you already know the joke is you, and it stopped being funny months ago. Afternoons belong to dynamite. The word alone makes your hands shake, not from fear exactly, but the anticipation of failure. You don't handle the fuses, that's white men's work, but you drill the holes they'll stuff with powder. Sometimes charges detonate early. Sometimes they don't go off at all, duds they call them, like failed crops. You've seen what happens when timing's off, blood on tunnel walls, limbs hanging by threads. One man who caught granite shrapnel in the throat and bled out silently while the foreman shouted at someone to take his place. Work never stops for injuries, weather, or cave-ins. Time is money, and you, as you're constantly reminded, are cheaper than both. If you fall behind, they replace you. If you get hurt, they replace you. If you die, someone kicks your body aside and finishes your task. It's not personal, just arithmetic. The ground shifts constantly underfoot. One misstep can twist an ankle or send you tumbling down a slope into sharp rocks. Your back hurts more from lifting than beatings, but both kinds of pain eventually blur together. You walk hunched now, knees cracking with every bend. The sun bakes you in summer, turning sweat to gritty paste in your clothes. In winter, the wind flays exposed skin. Your hands go numb within minutes, but you keep swinging because stopping means freezing. The handle slips from your stiff fingers once. Someone behind curses. You retrieve it with purple-tinged hands. No words are exchanged, everyone understands. Time loses meaning. Not just hours, but whole days blur together. Work ends when the foreman leaves, not when the sun sets. Sometimes he forgets. Sometimes he doesn't care. You dig until your fingers bleed. When you finally stop, it's not because you're finished. Your body simply refuses to continue. Arms fall limp. Legs give out. You drop the pick and lean against a rock, panting through clenched teeth. The worst part isn't the pain, it's the silence afterward. That moment when noise stops and stillness rushes in, heavy with accusation. You look at the pile of stones you've moved from one side of the slope to another and feel nothing. No pride, no relief, just exhaustion and the knowledge that tomorrow the pile will be different, but the pain won't. Sunset bathes the valley in gold that feels like mockery. You're too tired to appreciate beauty. The white workers leave first. The foreman lingers to count tools. When he finally goes, you wait an extra moment in case he returns to yell about something missed. Shouldering your pick, heavier now than at dawn, you limp back toward camp. Your palms sting. One finger won't stop twitching. Blood crusts under your nails. You don't remember when that happened. You pass a rock pile stacked like a headstone. No name, just stones balanced carefully beside the path. You nod once and keep walking. Tomorrow will be worse. It always is. After 12 hours of breaking your body against unyielding stone, you return to camp carrying a hunger that feels less like appetite and more like a wasting disease. It lives between your ribs, beneath your hollowed stomach, at the back of your throat, where bile sometimes bubbles up from the effort of pretending you're fine. But here, hunger isn't something you cure. It's something you manage, like the cold, like the pain, like the slow realization that everything inside you is being converted into wealth for men who wouldn't spit on your corpse. And for all that sacrifice, you don't even get the dignity of a prepared meal. You must cook your own damn supper. No cook waits with steaming bowls. No communal pots bubble over crackling fires. Just a collection of dented pots and bent ladles near a stone-lined pit where damp wood struggles to catch flame. If you want to eat, you compete, not for food itself, but for the chance to cook it before your fingers freeze stiff. Sometimes there's a line, sometimes a scuffle, sometimes the fire simply refuses to cooperate, and men sit chewing cold rice while pretending it's fine. Your meals consist of whatever provisions you carried in or whatever survived the latest shipment, assuming nothing was stolen, spoiled, or borrowed by another starving soul. Most nights that means rice. Always rice. Maybe a scrap of dried fish staring up at you with reproachful eyes. On rare occasions, a pickled vegetable or tofu scrap that somehow survived the journey. You've seen men weep over a stolen radish. You've also seen men beaten for stealing one. Food becomes sacred here, not for its taste, but because it's the last choice you're permitted to make. You rinse the rice twice, once for dirt, twice to avoid poisoning yourself from the camp's water barrels, which are filled from a stream downstream of animal carcasses and runoff. You boil everything now, even when the fire barely flickers. The effort is worth it. You've watched a man die from dysentery, his eyes bulging as his body rejected everything he'd swallowed. Your eating utensils, the same chopsticks used for cooking, pointing, surviving, have gone dark with soot. Your hands tremble as you eat, though you tell yourself it's just fatigue. A few grains fall into dirt. You almost bend to retrieve them before stopping yourself, not from pride, but fear that if you start eating off the ground, you might never stop. Beside you, one man eats with closed eyes, as if transporting himself elsewhere. You envy him. Another chews like it's punishment, scowling into the fire. Most eat in silence. Words cost energy. Energy requires food, and food is perpetually scarce. You learn to savor textures, the resistance of undercooked rice, the rubbery tug of preserved mushrooms. Flavor matters less than temperature. Hot means safe, cold means risk. The cooking area air hangs thick with competing stenches. Fermented fish's salty punch, rice's earthy sweetness, burnt wood's acrid tang, the sour rot of spilled broth left too long in dirt. Occasionally, a whiff of something unimaginable drifts over. Beef, onion, garlic from the white workers' camp. Heads turn instinctively. Every nose lifts slightly. Every expression tightens. Their food smells like a different planet. The white workers don't cook. They have hired cooks who ladle stew, potatoes, real bread with actual butter on a heavy plates. You've watched them toss barely touched food into mud while you chew another bowl of plain rice and try not to think about protein. Once, someone tried trading for their leftovers. The cook laughed, called him vermin, and threw bones into the fire. They complain about your food smell, not to your face, but loud enough to carry. Stinks like death, one mutters, waving smoke away like a personal insult. Another jokes about you boiling rats. You say nothing because speaking is dangerous. You laugh quietly because not laughing is worse. You're learning this tightrope between response and survival, between pride and preservation. Food fights happen, though no one calls them that. Just brutal, brief scuffles over stolen rice or missing dried fish. No investigations, just bruises and silence, and the knowledge that tomorrow it might be you. Now you hide food in your bedding, wrapped in cloth beneath your straw mat. You sleep with one hand over it, not from greed, but because hunger turns men who once shared stories into thieves. The irony? Your diet is probably healthier. You boil everything, avoid spoiled meat, rarely touch alcohol. Yet you're the ones accused of filth. You watch white workers vomit after bad whiskey while your stomach adapts, because it must. Still, the hunger gnaws. Your belly stays hollow. Rice fills space, but not needs. You get dizzy standing too fast. Gums bleed when you brush. Nails grow brittle. Once, someone shared a peach, a real one, bruised but impossibly fragrant, costing 2 days' wages. He sliced it into 8 slivers with a rusted knife. Each piece barely a mouthful, but the only sweet thing you'd tasted in months. You remember that peach more clearly than some dead man. Its softness, its sun-warmed skin, its absurd generosity. That minute of sweetness was the closest thing to joy you'd felt since arriving, and it lasted less than 60 seconds. Tonight, it's just rice again. You chew slowly, wincing when a fishbone sticks in your throat. When the bowl's empty, you scrape it clean with fingers, lick them dry, then stare into cold ashes where fire should be. There's nothing left to do but lie on your damp mat, curling against cramps that feel like someone spooning out your insides. You press knees to chest, arms folded tight, not to soothe, but to contain the agony. Morning comes with its usual orchestra, boots crunching, coughs tearing through canvas, the hiss of boiling water, and that first shout already dripping with anger. You rise stiffly, back aching, hands still sore from yesterday. Then you remember what awaits: the rocks, the slopes, the tunnels, the dynamite. You boil water, lace boots, say nothing. Because here, the only constants are hunger and death. Death announces itself first with sound, always sound. A sharp crack, a deep rumble, a wet thud cutting through labor's rhythm like scissors through twine. You flinch before understanding. By the time you look, it's already too late. A man vanishes into a trench, under a rock, inside a tunnel that seconds earlier held itself together through geological stubbornness. No warning, no dramatic collapse, just absence where a living man once stood. Accidents aren't exceptional here. They're routine, as natural as lunch breaks. Foremen call them unfortunate, as if gravity itself bore grudges. The real causes are always the same: speed, cost, and the unspoken rule that your safety isn't worth slowing progress. You're told where to dig and how fast, never how to survive doing it. That part's apparently your responsibility, despite cracked tools, vague instructions, and shifting rock overhead. You've learned the signs: a tunnel wall's creaking groan, cold air gusting from wrong directions, dust dancing strangely in lantern light right before ceilings give way. You try warning others, but sometimes they don't hear. Sometimes they hear, but keep working anyway. Stopping earns reprimands, and reprimands earn reassignments to worse jobs. No one wants reassignment. Explosions are the worst. You don't handle fuses, but drill the holes they're stuffed into. You know black powder's cloying sweetness, how it coats everything like toxic pollen. You've timed enough blasts to recognize when something's wrong. Fuses burning too fast, charges failing to detonate, duds requiring careful excavation, like poking a sleeping tiger. And if it explodes prematurely, then it's not your problem anymore. One morning, your friend Lim disappears mid-song. You were shoulder deep in blasted rubble together, him humming some half-remembered tune from home. You meant to ask about it. Then the charge detonated early, a breath too soon. The blast knocked you backward. Dust filled your lungs. When it cleared, Lim was gone. Just gone. They never found his body, just part of a boot, a strip of cloth, and his shovel leaning against rock as if waiting. No marker, no ceremony. The translator muttered something about reporting it. The foreman didn't look up from his clipboard. You stared at that shovel all day, unsure whether to move it or leave it. Someone eventually took it. You didn't ask who. It didn't matter. The mountain itself tries killing you. Loose stone crumbles underfoot. Mudslides drag men into ravines. Ice hides in shadows until someone slips. You've watched figures vanish mid-step, sometimes screaming, sometimes silently. Either way, they're gone. Weather is an inconvenience here. It's a weapon. Rain turns everything to slick danger. Snow disguises deadly holes. Blizzards arrive like invading armies, reducing visibility to arm's length. Tunnels are the worst, crawling into the earth's mouth and daring it to chew. The air sits stale and thick with dust that never leaves your lungs. Wooden supports groan constantly. Walls drip mineral-tainted water. When collapses happen, there's no heroic rescues, just thunderous crashes followed by silence. You freeze. Wait to see if more falls, then exhale when it doesn't. You don't shout for survivors. If they lived, they'll crawl out covered in blood. If not, they've become part of the mountain. Foremen treat death as nuisance. When someone dies, work pauses just long enough to drag the body aside. Sometimes not even that. You once spent a full shift digging beside a bloodstain the dirt kept drinking. You didn't look at it, just kept shoveling. Easier that way. You've learned to ignore certain sounds, screams cutting off abruptly, shouts for help no one answers, the crunch of bone under rock, the wet slap of bodies hitting ground from heights. You file them away in some mental drawer that no longer flinches. You don't think about the men, just their hands, their boots, what remains. Easier. You've mastered denial too. Telling yourself the vanished man might have just left camp, that the stopped coughs meant reassignment, that lone shovel was just extra. Not true, but it helps you move. And moving is all that keeps you alive. No one mourns openly. Grief is weakness here. Weakness gets noticed. Getting noticed gets you replaced. So you press it down. The sadness, guilt, helplessness, burying it beside the hunger, pretending it's just another cramp. If asked what's wrong, no one asks. You shrug. If someone looks too long, you look away. At night, you replay Lim's last moments. The air sucking inward before the blast, the dust swallowing the world, his song stopping mid-note. You never asked what it meant. That somehow hurts more than the missing body, the unanswered question, the interrupted melody. The snow starts falling again, not beautifully, just relentlessly, settling into every tent gap. It melts on your cheeks as you stare upward, telling yourself your face is only wet from weather. But your breath hitches, your hands won't stop shaking. You curl tighter under the thin blanket, clenching teeth against whatever sound might escape. You can't tell if it's snow or silent tears wetting your face. Not that it matters. The mountain hasn't killed you yet, but the men might. The white workers' hatred doesn't come at you like bullets or blades. Nothing that direct would require effort. Their cruelty is quieter than ambush, but more constant than hunger, seeping into their sidelong glances, the way they speak around you like you're some foul odor they've learned to tolerate, but never accept. Some call you John, because remembering your actual name would require seeing you as human. Others call you Rat, not as insult, but classification, something small and filthy that slipped in where it doesn't belong. You've been called worse, but never with such casual repetition. They don't view you as competition. They see you as infestation. That's what stings most. Being blamed for their stagnant wages, their spoiled food, their ill-fitting boots. You lay more track, haul heavier loads on fewer calories, yet they act like you're stealing something just by surviving. Like your existence itself is cheating. Tools become battlegrounds. Their shovels and hammers are guarded like family heirlooms, passed between them with possessive care. Touch one by accident and voices rise in a language you don't fully grasp but understand completely. So you fashion your own from scrap metal, bending, lashing, praying the makeshift tools hold together one more day. They rarely do, but at least when they fail, it's your problem alone. They start fights and blame you. A shove here, a trip there, fist swung just low enough to avoid supervisor sightlines. Defend yourself once and you're labeled aggressive, dangerous. They encircle you in groups, making sounds you're supposed to recognize as words, sometimes mocking, sometimes threats, always meant to remind you of your place. Ignore them and they escalate. Speak and they laugh. Fight back and they lie. You saw one man dragged off and beaten bloody after being accused of attacking someone who'd insulted his mother in English. He hadn't even understood the insult. No one translated it. No one questioned the accuser. The bruises were evidence enough. Now you've mastered the art of vanishing, lowering your gaze, nodding politely when required, softening your footsteps when passing their camp. You don't stand tall. You don't walk fast. You make yourself smaller, not because you are, but because survival here depends on being overlooked. You know what they see. Not a worker, not a man, just something foreign and breakable, like porcelain they'd rather smash than comprehend. There's a hierarchy here, and you're not at the bottom. You're beneath consideration entirely. The Irish, the Germans, even fresh off the boat Americans all feud among themselves. But regarding you they agree. You're the eternal outsider, the joke, the ghost they blame when tools go missing or tents leak. You hear their fragments of conversation, stole the water barrel, probably eating rats again. Laughter like shovels scraping bone. One mimics your accent when he thinks you're not listening. Another performs exaggerated bows each time you pass, his friends wheezing like it's comedy gold. You say nothing, not from lack of shame, but because reacting costs more than you can afford. Dignity is expensive here. You pay in silence instead. Sometimes they test boundaries, offering cigarettes, drinks, handshakes only to yank them away laughing. Or worse, actually giving them to you just to watch you hesitate, to see if you'll take what their hands have touched. You never know if it's charity or trap, usually both. You learn to refuse everything. You stop believing kindness exists unless it comes from someone who shares your hunger. The foremen don't stop the harassment. They either join in, ignore it, or intervene only when noise draws higher attention, then scold both sides equally, as if existing while Chinese deserves equal blame to those throwing punches. Punishments land equally too, or worse, since you're the one already under scrutiny. You're the expected failure, the assumed troublemaker, the perpetual suspect. Even when unobserved, you feel their contempt, walking past their camp, smelling real meat and bread while their eyes crawl over your back like lice. One spits near your feet, close enough to hear, far enough to claim accident. You don't flinch. You've trained yourself not to. You don't pray for respect anymore. That delusion died weeks ago along with your name and your accent and your childhood belief in fairness. What you want now is invisibility, to move through this world unnoticed. Because when they notice you, they remember they hate you. And when they remember they hate you, someone gets hurt. You can't afford to be that someone. Not when the mountain's already trying to kill you. Not when the company wouldn't blink if you vanished tomorrow. There might be decent ones among them, or at least less cruel ones. But you don't have time to find them. And if you did, what would you say? What would they hear? Your language is silence now. You don't explain yourself to people who consider your existence an inconvenience. You save words for your brothers, The ones who share rice without keeping count, who know kindness doesn't require witnesses. Sometimes at night, you imagine being born elsewhere, speaking the right words, having the right face, the right skin. The thought dies quickly. You're too exhausted for hypotheticals, too sore, too familiar with the weight of otherness. This is your reality. Back bent under rock, breath short from cold, eyes fixed on dirt. So when another white worker spits near your boots, never on them, always near enough to notice, you don't react. Not with word, not with glance. You stare ahead, motionless, because survival here depends on being forgotten. And being forgotten is always safer than being proud. The promised $30 a month had sounded like salvation back in Guangdong. More money than your village saw in years, enough to send home, pay debts, maybe return with your head held high. You'd pictured yourself standing taller, buying meat for aging parents, new shoes for little brothers, perhaps even finding a wife. $30 was going to be your redemption. By the first payday, that dream had curdled into something else, a trick, a mirage, a whisper of what might have been. The company keeps meticulous records, neat ledgers full of deductions and fees and fine print you never signed, but somehow agreed to the moment you lifted a shovel. You're not handed money. You're handed an accounting, a slip of paper, if they bother, listing earnings before subtracting them line by line until the balance mocks you. That first month's 30 became 20. No explanation. No questions asked. You're charged for everything. Tools rented. Never mind they were cracked when issued. Bedding. That lice-ridden straw mat billed monthly as if replaced. Food. Must buy from company store at inflated prices unless you fancy starving. Injuries. Wrap it yourself. Illness. Drink hot water. Toothache. Pull it or endure. One man coughed blood for 3 days before collapsing. No doctor came. Just relocation to a quieter tent. You visited once. He looked like a guttering candle. Thin, flickering, still trying to burn. You attempted contacting his family, but he had no address, just a name the company never recorded. Some months you get less than 20. Once it was 16, supply cart delays, higher costs passed down. The translator explained with something like shame in his voice. Passed down like misery was just another line item. You watched one man go weeks unpaid after losing a pickaxe. The handle snapped mid-swing, head tumbling down a cliff. They docked him full replacement cost plus investigation time. He didn't speak for a week afterward, just stared into flames blinking like he'd seen something unseeable. Arguments are pointless. The last man who tried, loud, righteous, fists clenched, got reassigned to cliffside blasting duty. No one survives long on that crew. He didn't either. Official report said accident. No one believed it. You checked his old sleeping spot, already occupied by another desperate soul. You said nothing, folding your anger into the same hidden place where you keep your hunger and the memory of your real name. You still send money home. What little remains, folded carefully into letters that are read, censored, sometimes lost entirely. You don't tell them how bad it is. You write about weather, track progress, joke about clumsy feet and white men's odd habits. No mention of deaths, of stolen wages, of what's been taken from you. You claim to be grateful because if they knew the truth, that you're breaking yourself for pennies, it would shatter them. So you lie with ink and paper, hoping the envelope reaches the docks unopened. You sometimes wonder where the money even goes. You never see it, never hold it. It drips away coin by coin into hands that never touch a shovel, into the pockets of men who wouldn't last a day doing your job. Once you saw a company official ride through camp on a horse so well-fed it looked insulted to stand among humans. His coat had buttons shinier than your cooking pot. He didn't glance at you, but you knew. He made more before lunch than you would all year, and no one would ever ask him to prove it. To protect what little pay you keep, you've developed tricks, coins sewn into sock hems, hidden under marked stones, tucked in rolled blanket folds. Some men bury theirs, though those have a way of disappearing. Theft isn't common, but not unheard of. Desperation rewrites morality. And there's always the threat of searches, foremen checking beds randomly for weapons, really just reminding you who owns your breath. Payday brings no celebration, just quiet suspicion. You open your envelope, if you're lucky enough to get one, scan the numbers like reading a verdict, nod once, and tuck it away. No discussions. You've seen men beaten for complaining about deductions, others moved to night shifts as punishment. Every silence here teaches a lesson. The translator once said the company dislikes financial agitation, like fairness was some disease that spread through speech. You looked at him and wondered what he saw in mirrors, a bridge between worlds, or just a man who stopped fighting because he got tired of losing. At night, you count coins by firelight, rubbing your thumb over presidential faces stamped on metal that would never recognize you as human. 1, 2, 3. Not enough for a ticket home, barely enough for rice and postage. Still, you count. You tuck them away with the reverence you once gave to prayer, hide them beneath bedding, and lie staring at tent canvas while wind scrapes over like a knife on bone. You wonder if your family believes your lies about doing fine. You wonder if they'll ever know what it costs to send so little. Outside, an argument erupts. Another man's pay came up short again. Voices rise, then fade. Footsteps retreat. No one's been reassigned. Not yet. You roll onto your side, feeling coins press into your ankle. They jingle faintly, a metallic whisper of betrayal. The rocks may break your back, but the sickness will do the real killing. Slowly, quietly, without spectacle. The illnesses come quietly, creeping into your lungs, your gut, your blood like thieves making themselves at home before you notice the break-in. By the time symptoms appear, it's already too late. These unwelcome guests have unpacked and settled in for long stays. And here in this godforsaken camp, there's nothing to evict them with. No medicine, no doctors, just a battered teapot, strips of cloth, and whatever dried roots someone remembered to pack when hope still seemed reasonable. You've watched men fall to cholera faster than thought possible. 1 minute laughing over breakfast rice, the next curled fetal in dirt, clutching his stomach and begging for water his body won't retain. The puddles beneath them tell the story. Thin, pale fluids like their very essence is being wrung out through their bowels. Dysentery is slower but crueler. Dehydration twisting fingers into claws, hollowing cheeks until skin stretches parchment tight over bone. When they go dry, not even enough moisture left for tears. Frostbite plays its own vicious game. It doesn't bother pretending to be disease, just punishment for being too poor to afford intact boots. Starts at the toes. Those always go first, biting through sock holes, turning skin gray, then black, then hard as petrified wood. The pain stops eventually, which is worse. That means the nerves are dying. One man tried laughing it off, tapping his frozen foot against rocks, saying, "Doesn't hurt at all," like it was some clever trick. 2 days later, his toes came off with the sock. He didn't talk much after that. Nothing outstays its welcome like tuberculosis, though. Consumption, the white men call it, a poetic name for watching someone cough their lungs out onto a blanket. The disease eats slow, first a tickle, then a rasp, then hacking so deep it sounds like a man trying to tunnel out from inside himself. The blood comes last, dark and stringy, spat into rags or onto sleeves, or sometimes just cupped in palms with a look of confused horror, like the body didn't realize it had given up until the evidence appeared. You've seen strong men crumble to it. Men who swung picks harder than anyone, who climbed icy slopes with frostbitten fingers, who didn't complain when meals went missing. They rot from the inside out, and they know it. That's the worst part, watching them understand. There are no doctors for you, not in your camp. The white workers might rate a visit from the company physician, some mustached fool with a flask and an oversized thermometer he waves around like a magic wand before declaring men fit for work. But you get a shrug and keep him warm, or boil the water. If it looks contagious, they might drag the poor bastard outside and tell him not to come back until he's better. Sometimes they don't even say that much. Illness isn't reason to stop working, just inconvenience to work around. Herbs are your closest thing to medicine, dried leaves from home wrapped in cloth and hidden like contraband in bedding folds. Sometimes they help. Usually they don't. One man brought a fever paste his grandfather used to make, bark and vinegar smeared on chests. Claimed it eased coughing. That night, he choked to death in his sleep. His bunkmate woke covered in blood-flecked spittle. The translator muttered about bad luck and told everyone to boil their socks. No one argued. The foreman blames you for being sick, says it's because you don't bathe enough, because you eat strange foods, because you breathe wrong somehow. You listen without speaking. You've learned there's no winning that argument. You could explain there's no clean water, that the latrine collapsed in last week's storm and no one fixed it, that you eat what the company sells you. Wouldn't matter. You're dirty by definition, diseased by existence. The fault will always circle back to you. When someone dies, and someone always dies, work doesn't stop. You just adjust head counts, shift schedules, make space intense. Burials happen at dawn before real labor starts, when light is weak and wind hasn't yet learned to bite. You dig shallow graves with the same shovels used to move rock. No priests, no ceremonies, just a few muttered words and dialects not everyone understands, and names scratched into sticks or dirt. The names wash away in next rain. You buried Jean last week. Young, quick with riddles, knew a dozen jokes, and never gave answers until you guessed 3 times. When coughing started, he hid it, sleeve pressed to mouth like it was just dust. It wasn't. Within days, he was spitting red. Within a week, he couldn't rise from bedding. The translator said he was faking, just lazy. By the time they believed him, Jean couldn't speak. You carried him outside on a blanket. He was cold before you finished saying his name. No one mourns openly here. Grief is risk. Show it and you slow down. Slow down and you get noticed. Get noticed and you get replaced. So you press it down. The sadness, the guilt, the acid burn helplessness, burying it beside hunger in your gut and pretending it's just another cramp. If someone asks what's wrong, they won't. You shrug. If someone looks too long, you look away. At night you lie awake replaying sounds. The air sucking inward before explosion, dust swallowing the world. Jin's last riddle trailing off unfinished. You never got to hear the answer. That somehow hurts more than the missing body, more than the shallow grave, more than the way his bedding was occupied before his coughs fully faded. The snow starts falling again, not beautifully, just relentlessly, finding every gap in tent canvas. It melts on your face as you stare upward, telling yourself it's just weather making your cheeks wet. But your breath hitches, your hands won't stop shaking. You curl tighter, clenching teeth against whatever sound might escape. You can't tell if your face is wet from snow or from the crying you've trained yourself not to do. Not that it matters. The mountain hasn't killed you yet, but the system might. It starts like rebellion always does, with grief. A man in the next tent loses his closest friend, not to rockslide or cold, but to something quieter. A fever that wouldn't break. A cough that wouldn't stop. No one helped. No one came. The body was removed at dawn with the same efficiency as clearing rubble. No one said his name aloud. Not foreman, not translator, not even his friend who sat staring at the empty bedding for hours, motionless, while others dressed for work. When the whistle blew, he simply didn't rise. No grandstand, no shouting, no fists or curses, just refusal to move from that dirt floor spot where he'd last seen his friend alive. The foreman came eventually with 2 thick-necked white workers, men wearing that particular expression of those about to do violence while pretending it's just their job. They told him to get up. He didn't. They asked again. Still nothing. They dragged him out and beat him until blood soaked through the tent wall. You heard every blow. You didn't move. Insubordination, they called it. Said you can't just stop. Not with track to lay. Not with money to be made. They brought him back, or what was left of him. Couldn't stand, couldn't speak. Next day, he was gone on a westbound cart. No one asked where. No one refused work after that. But someone did try organizing. Quietly, carefully, like tiptoeing through a den of sleeping snakes. He was smart, knew some English, could read, even kept notes in a little book hidden in his boot about labor terms and pay discrepancies. He talked to men during meal breaks, explained how many hours they worked versus pay received, asked if others thought it strange how many deaths were called natural causes. At first, people listened, nodded. Some seemed to agree. Then suddenly, he was gone. No goodbye, no witnessed departure. His things remained in his tent, blanket folded, shoes aligned, notebook missing. The translator said reassignment. The foreman said went home. Both lied. You could see it in their eyes. You checked the rock pile where unclaimed bodies went. No sign, just air and questions. You learned something then, something cold and sharp and final. You can disappear here, not metaphorically, literally, be erased like chalk from slate, and the work will continue without pause. You never considered yourself political, didn't come here to argue, came to earn, to survive, to send money home. But even you once nearly asked a question, just one, about why white workers get Sundays off and you don't. Why their tents have stoves and you freeze. Why their meals come hot and yours raw. Why they're seen and you're blamed. The question formed in your mouth one evening, quiet, casual, and you almost asked it. Then you remembered the man with the notebook. So you didn't, and you haven't asked anything since. Now you speak only when necessary. And even then, briefly, you nod when ordered. You listen when scolded. You thank the translator for delivering your own instructions back to you in comprehensible language, as if you should be grateful for the privilege of obeying. You've learned silence isn't weakness, it's armor. That not knowing is sometimes safer than understanding. The less you say, the less you're seen. And the less you're seen, the more likely you are to keep waking up in the same bed each morning. Your mind quiets too. That surprised you. At first, you used to think while working about home, about your mother's hands peeling oranges, about sunlight on rice fields, about your sister's laugh. Now you don't think much at all. You shovel, you swing, you carry, you eat, you sleep. The rhythm consumes imagination. It dulls senses until you forget there was ever anything else to remember. You stop asking when this ends. You used to count weeks. Now you've lost track of days. You used to tell yourself you'd leave when you saved enough. Now you don't even calculate what enough means. You used to pray, not devoutly, but with purpose. Now your prayers are rote, muttered phrases before sleep that even you know you don't mean. You're not waiting anymore. You're enduring. That's what this place makes you. Not a fighter, not a dreamer, but a shape that keeps moving because it hasn't broken yet. Someone near you jokes about rebellion once. Not seriously, just a muttered comment about replacing the foreman with a goat to see if anyone notices. A few men laugh. One doesn't. He looks up, scans camp, then hisses something about watching your mouth. The laughter stops. Everyone keeps eating. That's how thin the line is. One joke, one mistake, one wrong moment, and the mountain doesn't have to kill you. The system will do it instead. When white workers strike, and they do, the company negotiates, sends representatives, adjusts schedules, promises better pay. They get Sundays off, thicker tents, meat stew. You watch from a distance as demands are met, and wonder what it feels like to believe you're worth the trouble. To have your anger taken seriously. To speak and not be punished for it. You think about the notebook man again. Then you bury the thought. Now when someone dies, you say nothing. When someone disappears, you shrug. When pay comes up short, you don't react. Because if you speak, you make yourself visible. And visibility is risk. You don't want reassignment. Don't want to be an example. Just want to keep your head down, your hands moving, and your name, what's left of it, out of anyone's mouth. The silence spreads like smoke. Others stop talking too. Conversations become nods. Jokes become glances. Meals are eaten quickly, mechanically, heads down, eyes on bowls. Even snoring seems quieter now, as if every man is trying not to draw attention. Even in sleep, you've started forgetting what your face looks like. No mirrors in camp. Your reflection in the soot-darkened stream shows someone unrecognizable. Sunken cheeks, cracked lips, eyes too deep in their sockets. Now even that memory fades. You haven't seen yourself in months. Not sure you'd know the face if you did. One night you wake to the sound of your own breathing. Uneven, rough. There's a weight in your chest. Not pain exactly, but heaviness. Like something settled there in the dark and won't move. You clear your throat. Doesn't help. You cough. Something thick comes up. You wipe your mouth. Taste copper. You tell yourself it's nothing. Just cold air. Just dust. Not that it matters. The cost will come either way. Winter doesn't arrive with ceremony or scenic snowfalls. It slams into camp like a frozen hammer blow. One evening you're huddled in your damp tent wishing the wind would ease. By morning, the world has turned white, snow choking the air, burying tent ropes, freezing boots solid before sunrise. You stand ankle deep in it, still coughing night from your lungs when the shouting starts. Move faster, work harder, winter's no excuse. Your clothes might as well be paper for all the warmth they provide. One threadbare shirt, a coat that stopped being useful around October, and wool socks that haven't been dry since the first frost. They issued you a second pair after the first shrank in wash water. Now you wear both, overlapping holes, praying they last another week. Your scarf is a rice sack cut into strips. Your gloves, if you're lucky enough to have any, are mismatched and fingerless. There's no insulation here, just layers and the grim understanding that cold always finds a way in. Boots are the cruelest joke. Yours leak at the soles, every step through slush feeling like walking on knives. You've tried stuffing them with straw, lining them with rags. Nothing keeps the wet out. You've watched men try drying socks by firelight only to wake and find one missing, the other half scorched. Frost clings to your trouser seams. Ice crusts your eyebrows. When wind whips through camp, it lifts tent edges like someone peeling back skin to expose raw flesh beneath. At night you lie teeth chattering, not from fear, but because your body has forgotten how not to. The tent's grown under snow weight. You've lost count of how many have collapsed. One went down after midnight, center pole snapping, trapping 4 men beneath canvas. No one died, but they emerged shivering wrecks, lips blue, fingers stiff, one unable to speak for 2 days. Another had to be carried to the fire and sat motionless until someone forced hot water into him. Since then, men sleep in shifts, taking turns watching tent walls for signs of buckling. No one's rested properly in weeks. Fires become precious lifelines when they stay lit. Wetwood sputters and hisses. Dry kindling gets stolen or hoarded. You learn to guard flames like food, hovering, shielding with your body, feeding pine slivers like coaxing a dying animal. Even then, one gust can kill it. You once cried when a fire you'd nursed for an hour died, tears freezing on your cheeks before you could wipe them away. Work continues regardless. You trudge through snowdrifts to the tunnel entrance, the path now a narrow canyon between ice walls where loose rock once was. Your pickaxe rings off frozen stone like it's mocking you. Shovels won't bite until you crack the frost layer first. Tools slip from numb hands. Nails turn purple. By midday you can't feel your fingertips. Still the foreman yells about slowing down. Frostbite sets in without fanfare, just tingling, then numbness, then a black ache that doesn't throb so much as settle. You keep working, what choice is there? It's not like you can explain your fingers are dying. When you finally remove gloves at night, 3 fingertips have gone gray. One feels hard as wood. The translator winces when he sees, rub snow on them, he suggests, and you can't tell if that's real medicine or just something to say. They blacken over days. The nail on your index finger loosens. You cut it off with a pocket knife, gritting teeth. No screaming. Screaming's for people who still believe someone might care. Eventually, the fingertip shrivels and cracks off while you're eating. You stare at this small piece of yourself in your palm, then toss it into the fire and keep chewing. The foreman calls you a tough little bastard when he hears, like it's a compliment, like losing parts of yourself is something to be proud of. You nod, even smile, because your teeth are chattering too violently to do otherwise. You've seen others lose more, toes mostly. One tent mate wakes unable to stand, foot black, leg red to the knee. They wrap it in cloth and call that treatment. 2 days later he can't breathe, fever finishing what cold started. You bury him with unmatched boots someone left behind last summer. No name spoken, no one's sure how to pronounce it anyway. No one cries openly. Grief is weakness here. Weakness gets you noticed, getting noticed gets you replaced. So you press it down, the sadness, the guilt, the helpless rage, burying it beside hunger in your gut and pretending it's just another ache. If someone asks what's wrong, they won't. You shrug. If someone looks too long, you look away. At night you dream of heat, not fire. You've seen too many die by flame. But sunlight, the kind that used to sit on your shoulders like a friend. That warm rice field from childhood. Steam rising from dumplings in your mother's kitchen. You wake with your face pressed into moldy straw, breath puffing pale clouds. You hold the memory until it dissolves. The worst part isn't the pain. It's realizing the cold is indifferent. Not cruel, just present. And the people who could ease it, the company men, the overseers, the world that sent you here, they're indifferent too. No extra coats issued, no new tents, no additional blankets. You hear the white workers were moved to lower ground for winter. You don't ask why. You already know. Your days are measured in firewood and how often you must stop walking to beat feeling back into your legs. Your nights are spent curled fetal, arms wrapped around knees, face buried in your own chest to trap what little warmth your body remembers how to make. You've stopped hoping for comfort. Now you aim only for survival. You take numbness over pain, pain over silence. You still show up each morning, still swing your pick, still haul frozen rock with stiff fingers and a shoulder that hasn't moved right since November. Because there's no alternative, because leaving isn't allowed, because staying alive is the only rebellion left that doesn't cost extra. On the coldest night yet, when your fire dies and wind howls like it knows your name, you sit in darkness trying desperately to remember what warmth feels like. The sensation, the safety, the humanity of it. But the memory slips away like smoke. It's gone now, like safety, like being human. Eventually, you're reassigned to tunnel duty, not by choice or skill, but because someone else died and a space opened. That's how promotions work here, by subtraction. One less body above ground means one more needed below. The foreman doesn't explain, just jerks his chin toward the slope. The translator says your new assignment starts immediately, his tone caught between apology and warning. You gather tools and descend. The tunnel mouth yawns wide, a jagged wound in the mountainside framed by timber braces that groan like old men when wind shifts. Stepping inside, light vanishes almost immediately. The air grows thick, cold, stinking of rot and sweat and stone dust. You breathe through your sleeve, trying not to think how far the blackness goes. Your job's simple in theory. Drill holes, pack them with black powder, run fuses, retreat, wait for explosion, then clear debris. Simple until timing's off. You've seen what happens then. Boots crushed flat, shovels split down the middle, once a chunk of skull the size of your fist lying beside a length of fuse that didn't burn through. You learn quickly never to assume a tunnel's empty before entering. No one speaks underground. Words feel wrong down here, too human. The walls absorb sound anyway, swallowing even shouts and returning them as weak echoes. When tools clang, it rings like gunshots. When someone coughs, everyone looks, not in concern, but calculation. How long can he last? When will he slow us down? The dust never settles. It hangs in the air like mist, coating your skin, your tongue, your lungs with every breath. You try wrapping cloth over your mouth, but it dampens quickly from sweat and becomes another thing to choke you. The coughing worsens. Everyone coughs in the tunnel. It's part of the rhythm now. Pick, cough, repeat. You've seen men spit into rock piles and leave red behind. No one mentions it. No one wants to see their future in someone else's phlegm. Lamps are few, oil's expensive, company supplies run short in winter. You carry a lantern when possible, but the flame flickers constantly in drafts, making shadows dance along walls like living things watching from the corners of your vision. You learn to work in near darkness, feeling your way with feet, trusting instincts over sight. You stop jumping at every noise. Stop imagining what being buried alive feels like. Eventually, you stop imagining altogether. Collapses happen without warning. One moment drilling. The next, the ceiling gives way with a roar that feels personal. Timbers crack like gunshots. Stone crashes down in an avalanche of dust and splinters. You throw yourself flat, arms overhead, hoping it's not your turn. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it is. When the noise stops, the silence afterward is worse. That's when you look around and start counting. You carry out bodies by hand. No stretchers, just tarps or blankets or whatever cloth hasn't been repurposed as rags. You've lifted torsos without legs, legs without torsos. once just a foot still inside its boot. You brought it out anyway. The translator told you not to ask whose it was. Just keep moving. It wasn't your job to care. Sometimes after blasts, you find things that shouldn't be there. Bones too old to belong to anyone from camp. A femur black with age. A jawbone half used to rock. The foreman says ignore them. They're nothing. But you think about them while working. About digging through death to build something new. About who might someday dig through you. The tunnel grows deeper daily. The deeper it goes, the less you remember the surface. You start forgetting what sky looks like, what real light feels like on your face. Time bends underground, morning and night reduced to lamp shifts. You work until someone says stop. You eat by the tunnel mouth and return immediately. You sleep with your body aching in places you didn't know could hurt, then wake and do it again. The surface becomes somewhere you visit, not somewhere you live. You see less of the others now, even those you once shared fires with. Tunnel duty isolates you, not by policy, but by proximity. Your face stays coated in soot and stone dust. People flinch when you pass. You no longer smell like sweat or food, just ash and fear. Your tent mates don't ask about your shifts. You don't offer stories. If you spoke about what you see underground, no one would believe you. Or worse, they would. You start forgetting words, not just English, but your own. Simple things, names for tools, animals, colors. Once you saw a flower growing stubbornly near the riverbank and couldn't recall what it was called. You touched its petals just to confirm they were real. Their softness startled you. Everything in the tunnel is hard, cold, sharp. You begin doubting memories of softness, of anything not carved from pain. One evening during cleanup, you find something drawn on the tunnel wall in chalk. Not words, just a crude face with hollow eyes and a mouth open wide in what might be a scream or a song. You don't know who drew it. Doesn't matter. You stare a long moment, then wipe it away with your sleeve and go back to work. You finish your shift as always, hands numb, shoulders screaming, legs stiff, eyes burning from darkness and dust. The tunnel doesn't thank you. It never does. It just waits for you to return tomorrow. And you will, because there's no exit, no promotion, no elsewhere. You walk back to camp with lungs full of stone dust and ears ringing like funeral bells, knowing the mountain hasn't finished with you yet. There's no fanfare when the end comes. No final dynamite blast. No celebratory speech. No ribbon stretched across finished track. One morning you wake, as usual, boots stiff with cold, shoulders aching from yesterday's labor, and find the foreman in an uncharacteristically good mood, whistling through yellowed teeth. The translator calls for attention and reads a company statement, so brief it barely registers at first. The line has reached its destination. The railroad is complete. That's all. For words to end your suffering. Then the translator adds, almost as an afterthought, that you'll be expected to vacate camp by week's end. You stand there blinking, unsure if you've heard correctly. Finished? You look at the mountain you've been chipping away at for months, at the last stretch of rail gleaming dully in weak sunlight, and wonder why this doesn't feel like completion. You'd imagine something more. Not celebration exactly, but closure. Some marker to separate this hell from whatever comes next. Instead, there's just a shovel in your hand and a foreman checking his list to confirm you're not among the few being kept for maintenance work. You're not. Of course you're not. There's a photograph taken that afternoon. You see it happen from a distance. A company man arrives on a fresh horse, gathers the white workers at the head of the line, and arranges them for a commemorative picture. They stand in neat rows wearing clean clothes you've never seen them work in, smiling stiffly as if posing with a prize steer. Someone produces a whiskey bottle. Another unfurls an American flag. The photographer clicks his shutter, freezing this live for history. You're not in the frame. None of your people are. The Chinese laborers, the ones who actually laid these rails, who died in these tunnels, who survived blizzards and cave-ins, are told to stand aside. Not enough room, someone explains. We'll take another later. They don't. This photograph will appear in newspapers, in history books. It will become the official image of triumph, of manifest destiny made steel and wood. Your absence in it will not be noted. It will be assumed. There's no bonus pay, no handshake, No clap on the back, just a muttered, "You're done here," and vague suggestions about work further east or south, wherever men like you are still tolerated for the price of their blood. A few ask for specifics. The translator shrugs. You'll have to find out. The company has no more use for you. You were a tool, and now the tool is being set down. Camp empties quickly. Men pack their meager belongings into cloth bundles and rice sacks. Some argue over directions. Others sit staring at the dirt as if waiting for instructions to rise from it. A few light fires not for warmth, but to burn what they can't carry. Blankets stiff with sweat, socks beyond mending. The occasional boot with the sole flapping loose like a tired tongue. You watch one man drop his pickaxe into the river and walk away without looking back. You understand the impulse. Your own possessions fit into a bundle the size of a child's pillow. One spare shirt, a spoon, the few coins sewn into your hem, a small pouch of herbs you never dared use. You add the last letter from home, the edges frayed from folding and unfolding, the characters beginning to blur where sweat touched ink. You can't carry much. You don't have much. Everything you've earned has already been sent away or stolen. Before leaving, you visit the graves. Not all. There are too many now, but a few. The ones you helped dig. The ones you remember. Most markers are gone, names washed away by rain. You scratch one fresh into the dirt with your boot heel. Not for the dead, but for yourself. To remember that someone once mattered here. That someone died for a railroad they'd never be allowed to ride. The foreman comes by your tent, nudges your sleeping mat with his boot. "Time to go," he says without looking at you. He's already thinking about the next crew, the next stretch of land needing broken. You nod, not for his benefit, but because you're too tired to do otherwise. Too tired to remember what defiance feels like. You start walking. No send-off, no farewell, just the crunch of your boots on gravel and the distant echo of the train you helped build rolling across the land like it owns the place. You don't have a ticket. You wouldn't be allowed on anyway. The tracks don't belong to you. They never did. The others scatter like leaves in wind, some toward towns hoping for work, others talking about San Francisco, ships, maybe home. You don't know where you're going. You only know you can't stay. You pass the charred remains of the cook tent, the battered supply shack, the tunnel mouth still gaping like an unhealed wound. You don't look back. No one calls your name. No one asks where you're headed. No one checks to see if you've actually gone. You could vanish now and it would change nothing. The track is laid. The photograph taken. The story told without you in it. At a crossing, you pass a white family. A man, a woman, 2 children. They stare at you like you're part of the scenery. Something expected but not acknowledged. The woman pulls her daughter closer. The man adjusts his coat collar. You keep walking. You've gotten good at that. The road stretches ahead, long, dusty, indifferent. You walk with your bundle slung over your shoulder, hands shoved deep in your sleeves. The sun beats down but doesn't warm you. The cold has settled too deep for that, somewhere past skin, somewhere permanent. You think about the railroad, the miles of track, the mountains carved through, the bridges built, the tunnels dug. All of it behind you now, none of it bearing your name. There will be plaques someday, monuments, museums. They won't mention the shovel you carried, the fingers you lost, the songs you used to hum before your throat filled with dust. You walk past the last outpost, past the edge of the map, into the blank space where names go when no one bothers to write them down. No one asks your name. No one will remember it. That brings us to the end of tonight's story. Heavy, thankless, and quietly buried beneath iron rails and American amnesia. If you're still awake, thank you for walking this long, cold road through lives built by broken hands and erased from record. For early access to more descents into forgotten history, ad-free episodes, or to support the show, the Patreon link waits in the description. Feel free to like, subscribe, or comment with other buried corners of history you'd like uncovered. If listening via podcast app, ratings and reviews help others find these stories. Special thanks to supporters who make this possible, including our chroniclers Andrew S. and Amanda Lampy. Sleep well.